Hi, I'm Susan Dietrich. I'm a Red Cross volunteer, and in my non-Red Cross times, I have taught cognitive psychology and neurology for many years, and I've always been interested in the way emotions interact. There's no better place to feel emotions than on a DRO, a disaster relief operation, as you know. And so I thought that would be a good thing to write about for a workshop. Let me share my screen with you. So I hope by the end of the workshop that you will feel comfortable in differentiating empathy, sympathy, and compassion, and to know how these emotions interact. Also, I'd like you to feel like you know the best emotional state that you can be at during a disaster and how to increase and decrease empathy to best serve our clients, our teammates, our supervisors, our supervisees, and ourselves to have the very best deployment experience. If you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to mute your mic and turn off your camera during the presentation, that would be great. Silence your cell phone. And I apologize in advance, my screen will freeze. It keeps freezing, so please just be patient and I will be back. You can unmute your mic if you want to ask questions, and I'll answer them during the presentation, or you can keep them to the end. I'll stay as long as you stay. Thanks for being here. So the emotions of a disaster are empathy, where you're feeling what the other person is feeling, usually pain, compassion, wanting to help, and sympathy, understanding the sadness of the event. When we experience something, our brains react. What we're feeling at any one time is the interaction of those separate feelings. If we can differentiate them, to some extent we can control how we feel and definitely how we behave. Let's first talk about empathy. That's the emotion that we typically associate with loving and caring. Its definition is the action of being sensitive to and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experiences of another person. So that's actually feeling someone's feelings, or at least what we think they're feeling. Now, this has evolved from the ability to imitate. You can imitate somebody's expressions, somebody's mannerisms. You can also imitate what they are feeling or what you're imagining that they're feeling. So I guess it's not too surprising that when you look at the brain, when you are imitating something, and you look at somebody's brain when they are feeling empathy in a conversation about loss, that it activates the brain in very similar ways. Now, people are not totally without empathy, totally with a huge amount of empathy during an entire DRO. It fluctuates, right? And within a person, some people have lower empathy than others. A person's amount of empathy depends on a variety of things, including how they were raised and how they are neurologically wired. Different people have different capacities for empathy. Let's look at the end of the scale here. Low empathy, and then the high end of the scale, high empathy. So someone with low empathy, you would expect to be a poor listener, somebody who's pretty well convinced that they have the right answer and that that's the only answer. This person relies on facts and information rather than intuition, and very, very difficult to tune into somebody else's moods. Whereas somebody with high empathy, they are all about moods. They are emotion sponges and they rely on their intuition, their gut feeling, Something about a person who's empathetic is that they are very open to new ideas and that they are open to whatever your perception is, even if it's something they don't agree with. They will go ahead and try it on a little bit to see how much of it is a fit for them. Now, if you have someone who has high empathy and they are giving their perception to someone with low empathy, the low empathy person is likely to come up with facts supporting their position. Now that sounds argumentative, and I'm sure that the person with high empathy feels like it's an argument. But actually, the person with low empathy feels like that's the very best he or she can contribute to a conversation. Does not see it as an argument. Now, an important thing to know is that somebody with low empathy is underwhelmed during crisis or a disaster. So they're very even keel. They don't have the highs and lows, whereas someone with high empathy, they can be overwhelmed by a disaster, by listening to the clients, by even driving through a neighborhood and seeing the destruction because they have empathy for the people who live in those houses. And they will need more time to rejuvenate. On the far end of low empathy, people are really not able to feel emotions of another person. Sometimes these people are considered cold or unfeeling, and that's just wrong. They're misunderstood. They do have feelings. Certainly the philanthropist, Bill Gates, is an example of this. He has Asperger's syndrome, and he says he cannot feel empathy, but that he cares. And of course, we know that he's an amazing philanthropist and humanitarian. Empathetic people are going to be best with clients during blue skies. Blue skies being when there's not a disaster. So they are able to actively listen and be reassuring and bond with their clients, love their clients, but it doesn't penetrate so much into them. They feel the pain, but it is not so overwhelming that they become overwhelmed by it. So the Red Cross worker does feel the pain, but they are able to give back loving feelings, feelings of service, feelings of caring, and not be focused on themselves, still focusing on the client. So you know, the best Red Cross teammates are empathetic. We develop great friendships on deployment. And we love our leaders to be empathetic and listen to us and listen to everyone on the team. You can imagine that the amount of empathy may affect the leadership styles of someone. You may be familiar with process-oriented versus results-oriented. Let's take a look at that in Red Cross leadership. So a results-oriented method is how quickly you can get from points A to point B. It's sometimes called the executive model or the collaborative model. One person is generally the decision maker and the other people comply. Now, this is going to be easiest for somebody with low empathy. They're not having to do a great deal of communication, and they're not having to imagine other people's perceptions of how things might go. While you might think that this would be effective, just here's the plan, do it. That might work really well in the short run, but in the long run, it's not the best way for sustainable long-term effect. Even Forbes magazine has called the results-oriented model the one used by amateurs. Yikes. For process-oriented people, they're not just focusing on A to B, they're focusing on how you get from A to B. This is a collaborative process, and including input from all of the different team members. Continued feedback and ideas help to improve the process, and you, of course, can see how this would be easiest for somebody who has empathy. Red Cross calls upon its volunteers to be inclusive and empathetic to team members. This is opinions from seasoned veterans to new volunteers from the community. They are all equally respected. And this is easier for some leaders than for others. So, do you have questions about what empathy is? Where it comes from? Okay. Well, that was a timely break. My screen froze. So if you had a lot of questions, then let's see if I can get my screen to unfreeze here. If you had questions, I didn't hear them. Sorry. Do you have questions? Okay. Let's look at a separate emotion. For the lack of a better word, let's call it sympathy. Sympathy gets a bad name because people confuse it with pity. But sympathy actually means the understanding of a situation, the understanding of loss. And you've heard, oh, I don't need your sympathy. But what somebody really means with that is, I don't need your pity. Everybody wants to be understood. So this is the understanding, the cognitive response, understanding of a crisis and being sad about it. But not having that gut-wrenching feeling of the pain of another person. And generally it's not just one thing or another through your entire DRO. Feelings fluctuate. Usually we have a mix of emotions. Maybe you've taken one of those pop psych quizzes on the internet to tell if you're a thinking person or a feeling person. Well, don't take those too seriously. The trick is to integrate the two as much as you can. Be thinking and feeling, head and heart. A sympathy can feel awkward. Somebody in sympathy will feel helpless, not knowing what to do, what to say to make things better. Sometimes we have felt that way if a friend's family member has passed. We send cards, I'm sorry for your loss. It feels awkward. But these feelings are relieved by action in helping. Sympathy put into action gives an empowered feeling, and that's called the feeling of compassion. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So sympathy is cognitive, thinking. The way someone who is sympathetic is moved through information. It's a bit of a stereotype, but often the people who lack empathy are the people who are really good at gathering information. This is what can move them. Statistics of devastation, information on the need, the very direct ways to help. And in a few minutes, we'll see how empathetic people can also use that as a tool. So any questions about sympathy? Okay, and we've talked about feeling someone's feelings in empathy, and we've talked about what understanding, but without vicariously feeling something, would be sympathy. Let's look at compassion. It's the understanding of someone's distress, like sympathy, but not stopping there. It's combined with a desire to alleviate someone's pain. This is different from sympathy. Sympathy would feel awkward. Compassion it's the feeling of wanting to help. It feels good. It feels passionate and empowering. Now you can see when someone is feeling just sympathy, just empathy, or feeling sympathy and wanting to act on it, compassion, that these are processed in different parts of the brain. But because they interact, it gives us the opportunity to modify our emotions. Now look at empathy. It's so great in dealing with coworkers and with clients when we don't have those overpowering feelings during a disaster. But when we're dealing with someone who has suffered a great loss, this can be really overwhelming. See how the pain turns the listener inward here? And instead of being able to turn that back with loving, caring feelings, the empathetic person is overwhelmed and gives back the looks and feelings of pain. And that's not good for the person with empathy, and it's not good for the client either. Remember how the brain was triggered in the same way when we imitate something as when we're having empathy? Now look at this. This is empathy for misfortune or empathy for somebody's loss over here. And over here, these are the neurological pain pathways. The brain can't tell the difference. If we hear of someone's tragedy, the brain reacts as if we cut ourselves. It doesn't know the difference. So people who are wired with less empathy don't have to deal with this. They aren't buckled by grief like some of us are. They can give service and caring. They can focus on the client. They are clear of thought. But the answer is not to be unempathetic. We don't want to distance ourselves from clients. It's to trick the body into not feeling the pain. We trick the brain into not feeling pain. We'll talk about how to do that. Now we know how to recognize our emotions and when it would be good to be more empathetic and when it would be good for us to be less empathetic when working during a disaster. Maybe you've heard you should be more empathetic with people. Maybe you've been dismissive of someone. Oops, didn't mean to advance that. So try these behaviors. Listen to the person who's talking. I mean, really listen. That means stop your own voice in your head. Stop creating your response while someone is still talking. And this is the way you can test it. Did you interrupt that person before they finish? You can't interrupt. And when they finish, then you can kind of summarize what they've said. So you're telling me that you know the scrapbooks are there, but they're under the rubble and you're not sure how to get them. You're wondering how to find them. Now that's summarizing instead of you've lost your scrapbooks, this is what you do, right? Another way is to clarify someone else's perspective. Be sure that you understand it before talking about your own perception. And then don't take the opposite position. Try to meet in the middle. Importantly, treat everybody's opinion with respect, even if you think they're wrong. We have volunteers that are 30, 40-year veterans and brand new people from the community. Try to make it a level playing field and model that process-oriented thinking. And then there's body language that can help you increase your empathy. Now, if you have little empathy, then this is going to be a tough one. But if you act like you have empathy, leaning forward, using eye contact, matching your breathing, matching your speech rate to the other person, you'll fool your body into thinking that this is how you feel. Pick somebody that you know who's empathetic and imitate some of their mannerisms. During COVID-19 especially, it's very hard to express empathy. All we have is, other than if you're there in person, your body language, but you're 6 feet distanced, and they can only see above the mask. A lot of people are not meeting other people's eyes, and there are a number of reasons for that. One is you can't see somebody's full expression, and they don't want to be misunderstood. They don't want to misread you. The other is that meeting someone's eyes is like a meeting of the minds. And in the pandemic, it's almost better just to make it not real. It's saying this is reality. And you know the ostrich that buries his head in the sand so that it's not real? It's a little bit like not making eye contact. But we do want to make eye contact, even during the pandemic. We want to try harder to look empathetic. So to show your interest, raise your cheeks. And with happiness, raise the bottom of your eyes. Think about little crescent moons. Make little crescent moons out of your eyes. So with sadness, the cheeks are still raised. The forehead is furrowed just a little bit. And the eyebrows slightly raised with that furrow. Surprise, this is when you relax your face and you raise your eyebrows. But really, it's going to be so much easier if you look at somebody or look at pictures of people and then practice it in the mirror. Now, I know that sounds silly, but you will find that people start reacting differently to you, and you will like that. Now, if you're an empathetic person, probably you're looking at these two people and you're thinking that you know exactly how they feel. It's because you're not only imitating feelings, you're imitating the feelings of someone in a picture. But you're right, the person on the left is probably feeling empathy, and the person on the right is feeling much better, feeling those feelings of compassion. Now, getting that empowered feeling, that great feeling of service in compassion it's a pretty straight shot if you're just caring, and if you're not feeling too much pain. You care a lot, but you're not feeling the pain. You don't have to convince your body of anything. The answer is not to distance yourself from the client. No. No, we want to engage them. We want to go forward. We want a strong approach. So with the empathy for loss, we're sad, we go inward. We want to pull ourselves out of that into the joy of compassion. We're no longer mirroring somebody's pain. It's a strong, positive, reassuring feeling toward the client. Now, remember how sympathetic people were moved to action? Information. Seeing the big picture instead of being riveted to a specific client situation. Red Cross has many ways online to stay in touch with the disaster operation. And not just the one you're on. Let's see this link to RC View. That shows disasters all across the U.S. that Red Cross is responding to. So it's not just your ERV, emergency response vehicle, feeding clients. It's, wow, look at all of these ERVs that are going out all across America to these different disasters and helping people. So we feel more like a small part of something really noble, really something great that's going on in disaster relief. Now, you already know that resting is going to have a big impact on your feelings. You just know that through life. You know, taking a day off is important in deploying. My first maybe 6 or 7 deployments, I didn't take my day off. I thought, I'm fine, and people need help. Why would I take a day off? I think it was my 7th deployment that my supervisor insisted that everybody take a day off. Actually, that's what supervisors are supposed to do. So I went to Old Town. I did some shopping. I didn't think about Red Cross that day. I didn't feel guilty. I'm surprised I didn't feel guilty. But the next day, I could tell a huge difference. I felt better. I smiled more. I was better with the clients. I was better with my coworkers, and I felt better. I was refreshed. And then I realized, oh, the day off. Oh, it's not just about me. It's about being a volunteer, better for everyone. We who are highly empathetic have to trick our bodies. Our brains are built to feel even the slightest differences, and they pick up on the way we behave. Let your brain think you're relaxed. Relax your body. Even if you're really tense, you can still make your body relax. You can relax your face. Tilt your head. An understanding smile. Not that grimacy smile when your face is really tense. A relaxed face and loving expression. A smile that says, you know, everything's going to be okay. Reassuring your clients. And feelings do follow behavior. You will feel so much more relaxed, and you will feel so much more connected in a positive way to your clients. This really will work. So we love our clients, and we can be even more loving by balancing our emotions. So what we've discussed today, I hope you can differentiate sympathy, empathy, and compassion. And you know a little bit about how they interact. We always want to be empathetic with our coworkers, supervisors, and supervisees. You can't have too much empathy there. Empathy is generally a great emotion also in working with a client, but in a disaster, empathy can cause pain and feel overwhelming, and then we're not there for the client as much as we should be. So keeping empathy controlled in a disaster, we can better focus on the client's needs. So hopefully you have tools now to both increase your empathy and to decrease your empathy when you want to raise it to compassion. I hope that your deployment is filled with the joy of compassion toward your clients, warmth and empathy toward your coworkers, and be as kind to yourself as you are to your clients. If you have any questions or feedback, I would love to hear from you. My Red Cross email